Right, here I am doing the highlighting on the cloak, and you can see that for detailed work you don't necessarily need a really fine brush. As long as you've got a high quality brush, you can get a very fine point on it. But these highlights are relatively rough. I'm not trying to blend them in because they're small figures and you'll be seeing them from a distance. So just make the highlights pretty obvious, really. Doing a little highlighting on the trim there. Not particularly necessary, but just bring that out a bit. And then I'll add a bit more white to the yellow and add a last highlight just to the edges and the bottom of the cloak. Just that edge bit. Now I'm on to these Flesh Ripper Brutes. I gave these a bit of a go over with a light bone colour, very light bone colour, and then using a dark red went over the top surfaces of the figure. I can just blend these in with a little bit of colour and a watered down paint and just blend them really roughly together. Now I'm putting on a brown wash over the entire figure, and that works just as well on the dark red and the bone colour and unifies the whole paint scheme together. And with very little effort I've got an interesting paint scheme, an interesting looking figure. Give these a bit of a rough highlight and they should be done. Again, with a dry brush you can take out some of the excess wash if you want to. But that's a very quick and easy effect, so you'll paint this pretty quickly. Okay, we're rolling along nicely now and getting some of these figures done. You can see I've added a bit of tattoo work to these obscene troopers. And I just did this freehand with a brush dipped in red and really just made them up on the spot, sort of tribal markings. And they look pretty good. I might actually give these a little bit of a sepia red wash because they still look a little bit fleshy and a bit light coloured. I want them a little bit darker, but anyway, they look fine as is. There we go. Now these cavalry figures, which were rather tedious to paint, they're pretty much done. Some of them need a little bit more highlighting on the horse and maybe just a few more highlights here and there, but they're certainly ready to put on the tabletop. They look great. Bit of highlighting on the cloak there, as you can see, a bit of highlighting on the blue around there. It's quite rough, but from a distance it'll look fantastic. So I'm glad that job's done. I just have to finish the bases on those. And these were quite quick and easy to do. You can see I just started with the white and bleached bone under coating and then very roughly put on a red and very rough highlights you can see there. Just a few strokes of lighter colour. And I picked out the teeth. And that's about it. Did the eyes, of course, black with a dot of white. Again, might put a little bit more detail on these later, but these look fine as is. And again, I just have to finish those bases. So all those are done. The next challenge are the 60 foot troops, the archers and normal fighters. That's 30 on each side. And I'm going to get those done as fast as possible because that's 60 figures and I don't want to spend too much time mucking around doing 60 figures. So let's come up with some quick techniques to get them done fast. Okay, now I'm on to these archer figures, and the first thing I did was paint a test figure just so I know where the colours are going to go. I've tried to keep this as simple as possible so I don't have to muck around because there's 15 of these to do. So that's my test figure. And then I just go on and start painting in the base colours on all the figures. So here you can see I've done the blue, which is the main colour, and the bow. It's just pretty tedious, You just got to go through it, so put on some good music and just try and get used to where the brush goes and get a bit of a rhythm happening, go from figure to figure, get them done as quickly as possible. Here we have the archers, and what I'm going to do with these is not bother with the highlighting phase. I did the base colours and then I gave them a wash with Griffin sepia brown colour, and they look fine from a distance. Maybe one day I'll go back and do the highlights and touch them up a bit, but once I've finished basing these properly, these are going to look great. That's as far as I have to go. Now I'm on to the Viper Legion, which are the bad guys with bows. And the first thing to do is just slap down a flesh coat on all the flesh areas very, very roughly, because I'll be painting over all the bits where it overlaps the other areas. So that's pretty quick and easy. Here's a Citadel Guard figure. As you can see, I put the base coats down, a bit of metal, a bit of gold trim, a bit of yellow trim there, blue and brown straps. Pretty simple. And now I'll give this a wash with the old sepia colour, and that should be done as well. And now I just have to repeat it for the other 14 figures. And there he is with the wash on. Now this wash is just a little bit more tricky than normal, in that I used a sepia wash for the white and the brown areas and the face, and then I used a black wash for the metal areas. So a little bit trickier and more time consuming. But again, that looks like a finished figure. I could come back later and do a bit of highlighting, but for the moment, that looks great. Oh, we're getting close to finishing. How exciting. These are pretty easy. They're just a red loincloth and a lot of flesh colour and a few sort of brown straps, brown haft of the weapon, and metal for the end of the weapon. The first thing I'm going to do is the messiest part, which is getting a dark red on the inside of the loincloth in there. And this is going to be messy, so it's a good thing to do it first, because then later on you can touch up where it's not supposed to be. There we go, that's done. Then I'll do a flesh colour over the flesh areas and a bit of red there, and put down all those base colours, give it a wash, and it'll be done. Let's do these base colours quickly. Here we have the boss of the bad guys, the Chaos Lord. Now this looks like a complicated and difficult job, but it was actually really, really quick and easy to do. And again, it's just layers of dry brushing. I painted the whole thing in a darkish brown, and then I dry brushed layers on top of that. Oh, I also gave it a wash of dark ink to go into the shadows. And then I dry brushed layers of lighter paint, just building up the feeling of depth. I painted red on these horrible tentacles, then a lighter flesh colour up to white, and then I put some blood texture all over the hands and here and mouth area. It's quite disgusting. Now the blood I've done in a previous tutorial as well, and it consists of Tamiya clear red mixed with a bit of strong tone ink, dark brown ink, and you get a very nice gloopy, glossy, yucky red. And you can really glop that on for this. Here's a chaos piece after all. You can see I've done the base as well. Really, really simple. The only thing I did by hand is really going back and putting some white highlights on the absolute highest areas. No trouble. On the claws, I painted them dark grey, shading up to white, highlighting up to white. And there he is, done, ready to lead the battle. And finally, this is probably the most impressive figure in the set. It's the Rock Warrior. Now, this may look complicated. It wasn't at all. Again, dry brushing is your friend, as is washing. Painted the whole thing in a dark, fleshy brown. Then I gave it an overall wash of dark brown ink. And then I just dry brushed lighter areas of the dark brown. I did a big dry brush of white along the tail feathers, and then a dry brush of black on the tips of the tail feathers. Very easy to do. Then I just did a little bit of rough detail work with the straps, a bit of metal on those bits. Painted the feet, the claws, as graveyard earth, I think it was. Highlighted that. Then this figure here, up here, flesh on the face, and lots of dark blue really in there. It was a bit tricky. I'd glued them together, so it's a bit tricky to get in there, but I just painted lots of dark blue in there. And this one was yellow, highlighted up to white. A few highlights on the dark blue. Bit of silver on the helmet. And then I used a gold just to trim the edges. It's pretty easy to do, especially when you've got one of these head loops on and you can really see the detail nice and close up. And that completes the BattleLore 2nd edition army set. So let's have a look at it all on the table. Well, my fellow painters, this is where we're up to with BattleLore 2nd edition. And you can see they're all pretty much ready for getting on the tabletop and hacking into each other. Some of them are completely finished, like these mounted figures here, and these guys, and these creatures, this Chaos Beast, the Rock Warrior, and the Rune Golems. Some, however, are just taken to a stage where they're ready to be played with, and later on I might do a bit more work. And that's all these archer and normal fighting figures. They look pretty good and they're ready to go, but I won't varnish them just yet. A bit later on, when I have a bit more time, I'll do some more highlighting. For example, just highlight the whites on the tabards there, and perhaps a little bit on the bows. Over here, just a little bit of a flesh highlight. Same with these figures. But they're all based, and they look great. And once I've done that little bit of extra highlighting, I'll give them a final varnish. But it's ready for the tabletop. It didn't take too long. Some of them were quite fiddly, especially these mounted figures. But it really just depends how much time you want to spend on this kind of thing. You can give them a base coat and a wash and they'll still look really good. So it's time to play some BattleLore 2nd edition with our lovely painted figures, and how much better will it look as a result? It'll look great. And you know, if something looks great, it's always more fun to play.